Welcome to the Holy Post. For the first time ever, the UK has appointed a woman as the Archbishop of Canterbury to lead the global Anglican Communion. Kaitlyn, Mike Erre, and I discuss the implications of the appointment and how Anglicans use flying bishops to maintain their unity over divisive theological issues. Are there lessons here for the rest of the divided Christian church? The latest State of Theology report shows a shocking number of evangelicals hold contradictory beliefs. Why are evangelical churches so bad at teaching the Bible and theology? Then Kaitlyn talks to AJ Swoboda and Nijay Gupta, co-authors of Slow Theology, about how our cultural addiction to speed and quick answers actually fuels spiritual disillusionment and deconstruction. Also this week, new data shows why most female animals outlive males. We've got some big news before we jump into the episode. A new live show recording is coming up later this month featuring all 4 HOLYPOST media hosts. That's Phil Vischer, Kaitlyn Chess, Esau McCauley, and me. The live show is on October 25th in Lombard, Illinois. That's in the western suburbs of Chicago. Tickets are now on sale for the event, so if you want to meet us, participate in a live recording, and connect with other HOLYPOSTers, this is your chance. Go to holypost.com/events for the details and to get your tickets before they're gone. That's holypost.com/events. Here is episode 690. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Holy Post. I'm Skye Jatani. I am here without Phil Vischer again. Phil was sick last week. He was sick last week, and now he's on vacation. I feel like he's just avoiding us. Yeah. And now Kaitlyn is gone, too.
I know.
Kaitlyn is beaming in from Durham. Why are you back at Durham? Have we driven you away already?
Yeah, I got freaked out, scared, sick of seeing you in person and just moved back. No, I am doing a speaking event in Greenville, South Carolina tomorrow with Mark Knoll. Oh. And we tacked a Holy Post event on here in Durham. And so 2 nights ago, we had a bunch of people in my former church. And there were good questions. We did it with my friend Sharon Miller, who's a local church pastor as well as an author who's been on the show before. And it was really fun. And it was like right after Taylor Swift's new album got released, which means a bunch of people came to hear us talk about Christianity and politics and then stayed afterwards to talk about Taylor Swift.
And I hear that you are a big fan of this new album and you fully endorse all of the language and innuendo it contains.
Okay. I think, as we've said, I think some nuance is necessary here.
Oh, I think
love
there is
the
some
album.
nuance, all right.
And I wouldn't use all the language or the words or the euphemisms in it, but I do really like the album.
Okay. The other chuckle you're hearing is Mike Erre, who's back with us. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Skye, and hello, Kaitlyn. Thanks for having me on.
Well,
and I'm not familiar with Taylor Swift's game, and so Kaitlyn was just explaining to me the album, and just before we hit record. So thank you. I'm now up to speed.
Well, now that you're up to speed,
I'm happy to do it for anyone.
Here is the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye, Phil, Kaitlyn, and the Holy Post. Skye, Phil, Kaitlyn, and the Holy Post. And sometimes other people.
This episode is sponsored by Blueland. When our kids were little, keeping the house clean became really important. Why? Because they licked stuff. They put everything in their mouths. The candy is on the floor. Wait, now it's back in their mouth. Lisa didn't just want our house clean. She wanted it mom clean. Clean enough for kids whose little fingers were everywhere and then back in their mouths. That's why we recommend switching to Blueland. Their products are made to meet the highest environmental standards. They aren't just clean, they're mom clean. Blueland products are 100% plastic-free and made with certified clean ingredients that are safe to use around the little ones we care about so much. You don't have to choose between the safe option and what actually gets your house clean. Try their dishwasher tablets, laundry tablets, or toilet tablets. Proven effective and completely plastic-free. And Blueland has a special offer for Holy Post listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/holypost. You won't want to miss this. Blueland.com/holypost for 15% off. That's blueland.com/holypost to get 15% off.
As you know, I've been using AG1 for a while now. For someone who hates taking vitamins and pills, drinking AG1 has been a fantastic way for me to get my vitamins, minerals, and probiotics every day in a delicious drink. And I'm not the only one. Just this morning, my wife was driving me to the office for reasons I don't have to get into. My car was in an accident. It's a whole mess. Anyway, we were on our way out the door and she filled up her own AG1 shaker bottle. And now my son, who's 20 and lifts weights every day, also swears by AG1. You could say I'm sort of a trendsetter in my household. Everyone loves AG1. Look, you may have tried other green drinks and found them to not be very appealing. I get it. I actually didn't expect to like the taste of AG1, but I really do. But there's even better news, because AG1 has just released 3 new flavors: berry, citrus, and tropical. So along with the original flavor, you can find the one that you like best. And just 1 scoop of any AG1 flavor contains the multivitamins, pre- and probiotics, superfoods, and antioxidants you need in one delicious daily habit. If you head over to drinkag1.com/holypost, you'll get a free welcome kit worth $76 when you subscribe. That includes 5 AG1 travel packs, a shaker, canister, and scoop. That's drinkag1.com/holypost to get started. And thanks to AG1 for sponsoring this episode. All right, guys, there's a lot happening in the world. Taylor Swift has a new album that we just, mentioned.
Huge.
There's apparently a UFO buzzing past Mars on its way to Earth. I don't know if you've heard that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I missed
that's
that.
coming. But we're not going to touch on any of that today because there is a new study from researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany. Do you know what this study shows?
No, but
Oh,
I'm
I
a
get
fan of
the
Max
daily
Planck.
reports on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are both well aware that women live longer than men on average.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm aware.
Well,
I'm aware.
the gap.
My wife's counting on it.
The gap between how long men and women live has actually been getting longer.
What?
It's now
Ooh.
up to 5.8 years longer for women
What?
than for men.
Yep.
But this new study shows that this gap holds true across different species. It's not only humans.
I always thought that
Mm.
a big part of the reason for the gap was just that men did some dumb things as like
Okay,
teenagers
you're getting
and
ahead
young
of
adults,
us.
and that
You're getting ahead of
shortened-
the survey.
Is that where we're going?
It
Are
is
we
a
going that way?
factor. It is a factor.
Okay.
Thank
okay.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
So
you, Max.
The study found that among 528 species of mammals, including humans' closest relatives, the chimpanzee, females
Thank you.
often have the advantage. They live about 13% longer in 72% of all species. So this is
Wow.
like
72%.
72%. So the question is why, right? Why
Because
do
they
women
don't get paid as much.
live longer? Here's a quote. What we found is that this female advantage in longevity is part of the evolution of mammals. It goes back millions of years, says the study's author. I love his name, Fernando Cochero. Does that sound like somebody who should be in Leipzig, Germany? I don't think so.
No.
No.
He's very smart, clearly.
The
But I
study
like him
finds
already.
that because females have 2 X chromosomes compared to the XY of males,
It's very
it
true.
may provide them extra backup against potentially harmful genetic mutations because they have 2 X chromosomes. If one goes funky, the other one's there, I guess.
Okay.
But the difference goes even further. Cochero points to the behaviors and physical changes that males in the species take on to mate and reproduce.
That's it.
For example,
That's it.
male
That's it.
deer, aka bucks, are bigger and they grow antlers during the breeding season to signal dominance and fight off mating rivals in an effort to
See,
attract females.
It's their fault. That's where this is going.
This is an
Just
evolutionary
fighting.
pressure, certainly. The ability to pass on to the next generation my genes causes this kind of rivalry, but it comes at a cost, he says.
Yeah.
Though these behaviors may seem far afield from the reality of humans, there are many parallels. Men tend to
It does not at all sound far afield.
well, we don't, bump into each other's skulls with antlers.
Well,
But he
Football.
says men tend to engage in riskier behaviors at higher rates, including smoking and drinking and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah.
So the study goes on to basically say that because men take more risks
yeah.
and do stupid things, they tend to die younger, but they also have worse behaviors. They
I like
are
that
also
my
less.
intuition about this is scientifically proven.
Yes, men
I'm
are
so
also
glad.
less likely to go to the doctor.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it
So
is.
when they do have health
Facts.
problems, they tend not to get caught
Okay, wait.
early enough.
What problems?
is there anything in this about, because my other hypothesis about this has been, I just saw that some new studies have come out even more confirming this, that like what keeps people as they age from declining cognitively so much, there's a certain category some scientists have started using for like people who age really, really well. And the most common denominator across them is how many close relationships they have. So it's like if you are in closer community as you get older, you're more likely to live longer and live a more higher quality life as you get older. And my guess would be that women tend to create those conditions for themselves more often than men do.
That may be true, but that's not what the Max Planck study found.
Yeah, we're talking
well, I would
here.
recommend to them to consider that.
Okay, well, here is what the Max Planck study found, which is kind of connected to what you're saying.
Oh, see, we're about to find out that I was right.
They found a correlation. Correlation is not causation, but they found a correlation between caregiving and longevity. The sex that spends more time taking care of offspring tends to live longer. An evolutionary explanation is that the caretaker parent needs to survive until their offspring are independent, which means we're going to be alive a long time, Mike, right?
Offspring are like not as independent as they used to be.
That is true.
Let's just throw that out there.
There are ways in which we can reduce it to some extent, says whatever his name is, Colchero. By changing behaviors and norms. Gender roles have evolved, and many men do take care of their children and focus on their own health more than they used to. For instance, men who earn more money are more likely to wear sunscreen.
Facts.
Mimicking
or they're follically challenged, either way.
Yeah. Last quote. Mimicking some of the behaviors that women have may be helpful. Let's make sure that men go to the doctor. So basically what they're saying...
that's just a universal statement. Mimicking some of the behaviors of women would be helpful.
Yes. If men cared for their children more, were more nurturing and self-aware enough about their own shortcomings and need for help, they might survive life a little bit longer.
I like how we needed a bunch of men to do a study to tell us what women have been telling their spouses and fathers and brothers for a very long time.
Okay, what I didn't get into, though, is there's more than just men behaving stupidly.
Let's hear it.
Estrogen has some positive effects on like heart health and things like that.
It has plenty of positive effects.
So that's a little bit...
Kaitlyn, you're too young to be an expert on this. Talk to me when you're my age. Then we'll see. You're just chirping around like you don't have a care in the world.
Yeah. I'm like deeply invested actually in this. I don't want this gap to exist. So I'm like a big fan of being like, hey, men, fix the problems that cause you to die young, because I have a lot of men in my life. I don't want to die young.
That's good. That's good. I think part of this is just like big dogs don't live as long as small dogs.
That's the title of the episode right there.
Yeah.
Okay, say more.
What?
Well, like men on average are larger than women, taller, bigger.
Okay.
And so we don't live as long. Just like big dogs.
That is not an explanation.
That's something.
That's a statement. That's just... Yeah,
I think bald people live better lives than non-bald people.
I'm
That's
not sure
a statement
about that.
too.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I may be bald, but I'm not
Skye complains
an
a lot about it, so I think it doesn't make
you
his
look
life
great.
better.
What are you talking about?
I know I look great. I'm not saying I don't look great.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm saying I looked better with hair, and you know that, Mike, because you knew me with hair.
I did, but I think there's an evolutionary advantage. I think.
Did you know Mike with hair?
No, Mike never had hair. He was born that way.
There was a little bit. There was a little bit of hair. There was a tuft.
It probably makes your mornings easier.
Okay. It does.
There's a lot of shaving
Especially
involved.
Mike, you don't have facial hair either. Like you're not styling it. You're shaving, but you're not like...
I don't need to cover up any bit of this face, unlike some people.
You shouldn't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We're not getting into personal grooming habits here. To keep the theme of gender issues going, big news. Big news.
You have great transitions.
I try.
You have great transitions, bro.
11 months after Justin Welby's resignation, the Church of England announced that London Bishop Sarah Mullally
I've heard Mullally
will succeed him next year, becoming the first woman to lead the national church and global Anglican body as Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop of Canterbury, for the first time ever, is a woman.
Big deal.
Big deal. Is it though? So
seems that way.
This is an article from CT that kind of talks about it. When she takes office, she will inherit the safeguarding scandals. Apparently, there's been a bunch of scandals about abuse of kids and cover-ups.
Yeah.
Seems to be
Shocker.
Seems to be like standard fare for most large denominations these days, as well as the ongoing same-sex blessing saga. So it currently, apparently, in the Anglican Church, gay couples can request being blessed as part of regular Sunday services. And the church is continuing to debate whether or not to add a standalone blessing, which would be kind of closer to a wedding ceremony, as well as relaxing the ban on gay clergy getting married themselves. So there's kind of two things going on with this. One is the kind of historic nature of having the Archbishop of Canterbury be a woman. And then secondly, concerns about what she might do to this kind of fragile equilibrium that they've got around this question of blessing of gay relationships and clergy and things like that. So the head of the Church of England's Evangelical Council, John Dunnant, said that she has a knack for showing strategic flexibility and graciousness to compromise across deep theological divides. So he seems to be like encouraged by Mullally's appointment. But she will be the third archbishop in a row who does not speak up for the traditional doctrine of the church on marriage and sexual ethics. Apparently, she holds to a more progressive theology on this.
That's uncertain, I think.
Well,
yeah.
Apparently, the Church of England has only allowed for female bishops since 2014. So the fact that, just over
priests for longer,
bishop, but now Archbishop of Canterbury in just over 10 years. That's right. So here's something I just learned reading this article. I did not know these things existed. Either of you familiar with flying bishops?
I didn't know that either until I read that.
Flying bishops.
No.
It sounds like a little known chess move or something, but it's so apparently there's some conservatives in the Anglican Communion who are complementarian in their theology, meaning they don't support the ordination of women in ministry leadership roles. And so if you are in an Anglican parish and you don't want to be under the authority of a female bishop, they put in place what's known as male flying bishops who provide oversight to those churches. And
they live less long.
Yeah, they don't live as
just in general.
Flying is risky behavior. It's harder to get life insurance if you have a pilot's license or you do skydiving. So
true.
Flying bishops can't. So one of these flying bishops is Rob Monroe, the Bishop of Ebbsfleet. He is a complementarian evangelical flying bishop. That's a lot of qualifiers.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah, complementarian evangelical flying bishop. He said that while her appointment would present some new challenges for the churches under his care, he knew Mullally had a, quote, long track record of gracious engagement and real understanding of the particular theological convictions we hold. So kind of a balanced response. There's going to be some challenges with this new archbishop, but she has a long track record of graciousness and understanding of people who think differently. All right, so 2 questions. One, is it important that the Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman? Especially for those of us who are not Anglican. Should we care about this? And 2, what do the tensions within the global Anglican Communion mean for the rest of the global church? Reactions?
I just have to say, I found multiple things about this fascinating that I just think need to be said. One is, I don't know if either of you read a little bit more into how this happens, like what the process is for becoming the Archbishop of Canterbury. But it's just fascinating to me, given our conversation, like the ongoing conversations we've had on the HOLYPOST about Christian nationalism. We have to remember the Church of England is a national church. The Archbishop of Canterbury is sort of the like symbolic leader of the whole Anglican Communion, but does not have like official authority over all of the other
First
churches.
among equals, as they say.
First among equals. So that, I don't think we in America think a lot about state churches and like what that means.
For good reason.
So,
we won the war. Yeah.
We were not interested in the state church. But it's just interesting.
Big dogs,
so how
little
this,
dogs.
first of all, she had to be approved by the king I guess unsurprisingly, but that's just a strange process. But she was approved by the king after a search was conducted by the Crown Nominations Committee. The chairman of that committee is a former MI5 boss, and he was appointed by the prime minister. And this was the first time the commission to find this person included any representatives from churches outside of the UK. So this year, there were 5 representatives from churches that were all former British colonies that wanted their input into this decision. So that's an interesting feature. But it's just, one, I just think it should be named for people who don't have any, like myself, did not grow up in a church like this and is obviously in America. So even if I was in an Anglican or an Episcopal church, I would not have real knowledge of the Church of England. That's just interesting to me that, like, on one hand, a bunch of people who are outside of the church are celebrating the first woman Archbishop of Canterbury and are like, this is so exciting. Don't realize that, like, the whole system for how she came to be in that position is sort of a weird system that exists from, like, a very long hierarchical church.
Does that take away from her? Does that take away from her nomination then?
I don't think it does, but I just think it's interesting. Like, I just think it's one of those things where people want to take an event like the first woman Archbishop of Canterbury and sort of put it in the column of, like, win for my progressive side. And I think that causes you both to ignore, okay, what all is going on that makes that happen? But 2, I think it puts us in this position where a lot of people have been like, well, of course she will, move the church, quote unquote, forward on gay marriage, because you just sort of assume a woman, that's a progressive, person, or it's a progressive move to have a woman in that position. So of course, everything, the dominoes just sort of fall into place.
So, but it sounds like partly what you're saying is it is a progressive appointment that there's a woman in this significant for the first time ever. And yet the process by which she was appointed seems very regressive. Like, it's not.
It's just kind of weird.
It's a weird old way of doing things. It's
wild that a bunch of people who are not authorities in the church, who are not theologically educated, make this decision. And I also just think it's interesting. Like, so on one hand, there's that where people sort of assume it's a woman. This is a progressive cause, so she will be on board with all of my progressive causes. On the other hand, what's interesting is the pushback that they've gotten from more conservative parts of the Anglican Communion. I've seen most of the reporting on this assuming that the issue is just the gay marriage issue. But as you said, Skye, part of it's the question of women's ordination. So it's just, this seems like a picture to me of how we really struggle to not just sort everything into universal boxes.
I hear that, but here's the part I don't quite fully understand. So, and this is true in American church as well. There are American churches that are complementarian in their view, believing that they, in some cases, it's fine to have women preaching. It's fine to have women in different leadership functions and roles in the church, as long as whoever's at the top of the hierarchy of the org chart is a man, right? They just think the top person has to be a man. So the senior pastor has to be a man, or the bishop has to be a man, or whatever. And this is challenging that a little bit, because now at the top of the org chart of the Church of England, for the first time ever, is a woman. So some of these complementarian churches underneath with their flying bishops and stuff are kind of having a bit of a crisis, because what do we do when at the very top of our org chart for the first time it's a woman? But I don't understand exactly why this is a problem, because technically, if my ecclesiology is correct and my history is correct, the true head of the Church of England is the monarch. Is that not true? I think that's true. I mean, you said it. The king approves the appointment of the Archbishop of Canterbury.
You know what? This is the interesting thing of, like, I've been in churches where a similar question is posed, where it's like, well, I'm opposed to women elders, or I'm opposed to women teaching adult Sunday school class, but if my male senior pastor says it's okay, am I still being complementarian by submitting to what they say?
That's what I don't get is England has had multiple queens as the head of the state. And therefore the head of the church, Queen Elizabeth, most recently. This is a good
question.
So I don't understand why these complementarian Anglicans are a little concerned about this when they've been under the authority of a woman for centuries in English law. So
I don't think it's true authority, though. I think it's ceremonial, symbolic.
Okay, but come on. When you say the monarch is the head of the Church of England, and that monarch is a woman, a queen, that's pretty stinking egalitarian.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
All right.
We need to get an Anglican on to tell us more about this.
Probably.
There you go.
Okay, what about the same-sex marriage stuff and the blessing of relationship? Like, do you think what the Anglican Church is wrestling with or contemplating here has any bearing on other churches, and are they navigating it in a way that is instructive for any of the rest of us? And there was
I don't-
silence. Total
Yeah.
silence.
I don't know enough to know. I mean, the flank bishop thing jumped out. And Kaitlyn, I was curious about what you thought about that, because I appreciate the impulse to try to stay together as long as possible and to work out compromises along the way. And so my first reading of that was, oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't personally agree. That's not the question, but that's an interesting way to try to maneuver and keep the communion, the Anglican communion, together. So I love that impulse, and I think, okay, that's a creative impulse. I don't know. I mean, Kaitlyn, do you know much about that practice or how long that's been in place?
I don't exactly, but it seems pretty similar to me to what the Anglican Church in North America does, what the Evangelical Presbyterian Church does, which is both try and leave it up to, because both of those American denominations leave it up either to the diocese or the presbytery, whether they ordain women or not. But to my knowledge, in both of those, I have a little more knowledge of how the ACNA does this than the EPC. But I think in both of those, there are creative ways to get around that. Like there are churches like our colleague Isa McCauley, who has a church that's in a diocese that is not regional, so that if there's a church that wants to be a new ACNA church and wants to ordain women, but the area they are in geographically has a diocese that does not ordain women, they can join this other diocese so that they can ordain women. Or there's a church in North Carolina that is in a diocese that does not ordain women, but they've gotten special permission from the bishop to have a woman who was ordained in a different diocese pastor here. I think there are a lot of denominations that have a similar reasoning of like, we're trying to stay together across this difference. But unlike other theological differences, this one causes polity issues. Like it's really hard to figure out how to make that work. And I'm with you, Mike. I have some tension between, on one hand, really wanting to believe that we can stay together and that our impulse in any church or denomination should be like, let's try and stay unified as long as we possibly can. On the other hand, it's hard when women are the ones who suffer for that, whether it's for not being ordained or whether it's just for the lack of clarity or the fact that they have to exist in different worlds. Like I operate in one part of our denomination and my ordination is not questioned. I'm in a different part of the denomination and it is questioned. And I know a lot of women who feel like, whether we decide that women can be ordained or not, I'm just sick of talking about it. Like I'm sick of my life and calling being constantly scrutinized. And I know some women who have stayed in more conservative denominations just because they just don't want it to be a question anymore. They want to do the things they can do and not have to be constantly in a fight about the other things that maybe the current denomination they're in doesn't let them do.
Having clear boundaries gives some freedom in a weird way.
And I feel like there might be something very similar to be said about the gay marriage conversation. I mean, we recorded an episode about this when the Church of England first announced it.
Right.
And I think what most of us said was like, this doesn't seem like it makes anyone happy. It doesn't make happy the conservatives that want to say, no, let's hold to a traditional Christian understanding of marriage. It doesn't make happy the people who want marriage to include a same-sex couple because it does neither of those things. It puts them in a weird in-between place. And I think I might have said the same thing on that episode of like, I have some tension between going, I want to praise a creative attempt to stay unified across great differences. And on the other hand, it's like, I think this question of this really intimate, important part of people's lives is worth figuring out and having some clarity around.
Mike, your church is not connected to a denomination, correct?
Correct.
It's an independent rogue cell.
Rogue One is our code name.
So when people come to your church or they ask questions about women or LGBTQ, whatever the controversial stuff is, what does that look like for you guys? Because you don't have a higher authority that you appeal to as like, well, we're part of such and so. How do you manage that stuff?
It's such a trade-off, right? The non-denominational life. That is a massive part of the trade-off. We reference, you guys are familiar with center set language versus bounded set language and practice in terms of how that works itself out in legit, like at real church communities. And so we use that language a lot. We talk about these issues a lot, and we try to take a centered perspective on them, namely that we don't do statements on what our unified take is on these issues, although I understand for some that would be a great deal of, that would provide a lot of clarity. What we do rather is we try to go case by case and to say there is no statement that encompasses what we think Jesus thinks about these things, how he invites people into fellowship. And so we use center set language. I personally hold to the traditional view, but we are...
You're talking about LGBT stuff, not women in leadership.
Well, women for us, I'm sorry, for us, women is a settled issue. We have women elders, women teachers, and down the line.
The risk of that is they're going to live 5.8 years longer, and you're going to have all the men die, and the women are just going to take over the church.
Maybe this is an argument for women's ordination. I don't know.
I'm just saying, I don't know. So that one's settled for us. But I think our community is made up of folks who would believe all sorts of different things. And so the center set model says we're not measuring someone's participation in the community by their adherence to a particular boundary. We're measuring someone's participation in the community by their relational orientation to Jesus or away. And sometimes that includes people who are, would classically not fit the evangelical stereotype, but have this openness to Jesus that a statement might otherwise rule out. So we do this dance of we're all welcome around the table. And when you bring people into the orbit of word, communion, spirit, we don't know what will happen as people sit in that.
There's a lot to admire about that center set versus boundary set kind of approach. Do you think that could be scaled up from beyond a local congregation to a denomination or even a global communion like the Anglicans? Is that something that is that a model you can use that broadly, or is it, this is one of those things that it's a local community and that's about as far as you can go with it?
My experience with it, as we've tried to teach it to other people, had loads of questions about it on our podcast or whatever, has been the abstract principles of it are totally translatable. Absolutely. But the pastoral implications of it there's no way to make those universal. And that's why I don't think you could scale to here's our statement on human sexuality. Here's our statement on women's ordination. I think that part of the attractiveness of the center set policy is that when you meet one person with same-sex attraction, you've met one person with same-sex attraction. And to sit and then draw broad categorizations from that, I just don't think that is wise in terms of spiritual formation. So I think there's some parts that it's the best language and best conceptual apparatus for navigating a church with loads of different opinions on these things. But the specific pastoral application, I don't know, can be translated well.
Wow. Kaitlyn, are you aware of any larger communities or denominations that are taking that approach, or is it everyone's just fighting over the boundaries?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I have been at a church somewhat similar to Mike's in the sense that, like, the congregation very mixed on particularly the question of same-sex marriage, but it's the working out of that in terms of polity is really challenging. I think even in a local congregation, it's really challenging because you run up to questions of like, okay, someone wants to get married. Or is someone willing to do that or not? Or how? And I've been in a Presbyterian context where I really appreciate, and I don't want to do this too much where I just get on my Presbyterian soapbox, but I really appreciate that our polity says those decisions, unlike the Church of England, those decisions are made by a governing body, whether that body is local, regional, or our national body. The challenge of that is that, like any decision about policy, like who can get married in this church, who can be a member in this church, who can be in a leadership role in this church, those questions, unlike a Episcopal model, like the Episcopal or the Anglican Church, where at some point on certain levels, there's one person making a decision about that. And it might be a really wise, faithful person. It might be a really theologically educated person. They might have commissions that study things, but there's an authority structure where, like, it's easier actually to make some decisions. A Presbyterian model is like, we're going to have meetings for months and it's going to take a really long time. But I appreciate that in the Presbyterian model, there's a sense that the congregation has determined these people are leading us, and that group of leaders is not one on their own making decisions about this.
That's right.
But I think it's part of the reason it's really hard for a denomination or even a local church to stay in a place of mixed opinion about this. You could say, oh, we're so polarized on this issue and it's really lamentable that we can't just agree to disagree. There's some of that I think is true. But the other part that I think is really true that people on both sides of this issue feel really deeply is that we're dealing with a question of a really important, intimate thing in people's lives. And it's not, I think sometimes we can rightly say, okay, this isn't in the creeds. It's not central to what it means to be a Christian. And I think that's really important. But on the other hand, I think sometimes we downplay the fact that this is both something that Scripture talks about a lot and something that is really important to people's lives on both ends, right? Like, this is something that I have dear friends who have committed their lives to celibacy because they believe this is what the church teaches. I think us getting that right really matters. Like, it's impacting their whole lives. I also know people who have come to an affirming position and it's changed their whole lives because of the way that they are, who they're marrying and what their family life looks like and the churches that they can belong to or can't belong to. So on one hand, I would love for us to be kinder to each other across this difference, because I think interpreting what Scripture says about it is really hard. And it's hard to disentangle what we believe about this because Scripture teaches it and what we believe about this because it's the community that we grew up in. That's really hard. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think most people recognize that, like, this is really important and it deals with really intimate personal issues that change people's whole lives. And I think we have to find balance between going, like, this isn't in the creeds, and also I hope that we would think our lives are more than just marriage and children. And on the other hand, this is like a really, really important part of people's lives.
All right. Well, Bishop Sarah Mullally, good luck with that.
Yeah. Truly. I mean, we should pray for her.
And everyone in church leadership, that including you, Mike, who's facing these conversations both pastorally and theologically.
Yes.
There's so much wisdom needed and kindness, as you said, Kaitlyn. So we do hope that goes well. All right. One of the things that would make it go easier is if more Christians actually knew basic theology.
Transition.
What a thought.
So there's a new State of Theology report, and it seems to show that evangelicals contradict their own convictions. When American evangelicals affirm the Trinity but don't see the Spirit as a personal being, as part of the Trinity, or when they consider Jesus as the sole source of righteousness but then insist that people are inherently good, either they're not enough churches are teaching sound doctrine, or not enough churchgoers are listening to it. That's the beginning of this article in CT about the new Legionnaire Ministries State of Theology survey, which they do in partnership with Lifeway Research.
Is that how you say that word?
Legionnaire? Yeah.
I had no idea.
Wow. This whole time I was saying it wrong in my head for years.
Ligonier.
Thank you.
Legionnaire?
Ligonier. That's what I thought.
I don't know. It's
Ligonier is what
whatever.
I thought.
Anyway,
I hope you're right, because that sounds better.
I've been following this survey for a number of years because it comes out pretty regularly. And it's been consistent in what it shows, but it's kind of a little disturbing. So, for example, 28% of evangelicals who all said that they, quote, trust in Jesus Christ alone for salvation, they agreed with half the country that Jesus was a great teacher but not God. So let me say that again. 28% of evangelicals who in the survey say that they trust in Jesus Christ alone for salvation also say he's not God.
Wow.
That's some bonkers theology right there.
That's a little rough.
And despite professing belief in one true God in three persons, more than half of evangelicals say that the Spirit is not a person.
Yeah, I'm not shocked by that one.
The survey.
That's...
Okay, this is a quote. The survey seems to indicate that evangelicals, defined in the survey according to the form of the Bebington Quadrilateral, we should we need
It's fun to say, isn't it?
It is a fun thing.
Isn't it fun to say that?
Bebington Quadrilateral, we can maybe talk about that later. Nonetheless, are confused about the nature of God and his relationship with the world he has created, said Glenn Kreider, Professor Kreider?
He was one of my professors.
All right, sorry, Glenn Kreider, professor of theological studies at Dallas Theological Seminary. It also demonstrates inconsistency in beliefs, even to the point of contradiction. All right, so this isn't exactly a news flash, but American evangelicals don't know what the hell they're talking about. So...
What a soundbite, Skye.
Let's just pull that one out on Instagram.
This has been a consistent finding. This has been a consistent finding of many surveys from different sources for years that church-going evangelical Christians in America don't know basic Christian doctrine.
Right.
Yeah. And there's nothing new in this survey either. So here's my big question.
Ooh.
Why? How can someone spend, in some cases, their entire life in the evangelical American subculture, including the church, and not know that the Spirit is part of the Trinity, or that Jesus' claim to divinity and equality with God is central to our belief in him as our Savior. How is that possible?
Well, Kaitlyn would have something to say about this.
Kaitlyn raised her hand.
One, I just want to say off the bat how funny it is. This is one of the weird contradictions of evangelicalism, because we're not denominational, we're not a state church, it's just weird that we have to define this group not by any institution, but by a set of 4 beliefs, and then go, but they don't believe the right things within that belief. It's just weird. It'd be different if we were the Anglicans or the Presbyterian, but we're a weird group that is really hard to define, and so that's just a weird feature of all of this. It will surprise no one that part of my reaction to this is to say, one, this is why biblical literacy really matters, but theological education, I think, is sorely undervalued, because we lament biblical illiteracy a lot, and I think we should read the Bible more. I'm a big fan of the Bible. But evangelicalism just constitutionally seems to believe that if people grow up in the church and they go to Sunday school and they learn all the Bible stories, they will know true things about God. And every heretic ever knew a lot of the Bible and still managed to say untrue things about God. And importantly, we talked a while ago about the definition of heresy. One of the central parts of that definition is, and resisted the church correcting them. And the part of this article that you didn't get to, Skye, is the part that talks about how shockingly large proportion of evangelicals think that church doesn't really matter, that it's just as good for them not to go to church. So I think what I hear from this is, one, we really cared that people knew their Bible stories, which I agree, and I love the flannel graphs, and I want people to know the Bible, but we fail to recognize that what's necessary to kind of understand basic Christian truths is not just memorizing Bible verses and knowing Bible stories, but being taught, what is the big, broad story of Scripture? Who does God say God is? Who are God's people, and how do we relate to it? And then continuing to be nurtured in a Christian community where you can ask big questions and you're not shamed or disciplined, but you are guided and encouraged and taught. And so when you have a big question where you say, hey, okay, so it seems like there's God, and then there's also Jesus, and then the New Testament starts talking about this Spirit, and it's the Spirit of God. What does that mean? Someone can say, you know what's the best news ever? The church has thought about this question before, and we have answers to it. And it doesn't mean the mystery is settled, and there's not just wonderful beauty to be encountered that can't be shoved in a box. But it does mean you're not out here trying to answer all these questions on your own for the first time ever. You're not reinventing the wheel. And both of those are sort of counter to what evangelicalism is, either to say theology really matters, not just Bible knowledge, or to say your church is a gift to you and can instruct you in things. You don't have to figure it out all by yourself.
Okay. I amen to all that. I can't disagree with it, obviously. But I do wonder, you mentioned the hypothetical of someone in the church asking this question, well, how does this all fit together? And who's the Holy Spirit? And asking these great questions and having resources and theological responses to those great, valid questions. I wonder if people just aren't even asking the questions.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's my deeper concern. I mean,
no.
Hold on.
Okay.
I have encountered young people in the church, teenagers especially, who I think are theologically more inquisitive, frankly, than many of their parents, because they are asking a lot of these deep questions. But quite a few of the adults, in my experience, not all of them, but a lot of them, I think, are engaging the church for really pragmatic help rather than theological insight. Like they're saying, help me with this, help me with that, help me with my marriage, help me with my finances, help me with these things. And they're looking for that practical engagement and understanding a doctrine of the Trinity or salvation, whatever. They're just not as curious about that. And I think we as church leaders sometimes do a poor job of inspiring people to be curious about those truths and explain how they impact ordinary life, not just the theoretical theology that lives up in a cloud somewhere.
But I also think, Skye, to your last point, I think many people who grew up in the church, the last time that someone seemed excited about what was in the Bible and who God is and are learning about it was when they were a child. Like that was the last time someone was like, oh my gosh, like with my face and my body, I am showing you that I think this is interesting. And I get so frustrated with pastors, with small group leaders, with Sunday school teachers who, because they think that they should act this way, because someone else acted this way and they modeled it, or because they're so afraid of seeming irrelevant or uninteresting or whatever, that they tell people it will be that way before it actually even is. Like the number of times I've heard a sermon on a book of the Bible that is like not the most often preached on, like Leviticus or something, every single time that I have encountered this in many of the churches I've grown up in, it's been like, well, guys, we know Leviticus is so boring, but we just have to study it anyway. And then people act surprised when people in the church went, yeah, Leviticus is boring. Like we act like we assume people don't have questions and they're not interested and this stuff is boring before they even get a chance to think it themselves.
Okay. I want to get Mike in here in a second, but I don't think I agree with you on that.
Shocker.
Man.
I know.
Man.
Because
we need a flying bishop just between the two of you right now.
by the way, Flying Bishop, worst Marvel character ever.
Oh my God.
No, and the reason I disagree, Kaitlyn, and maybe my experience is too narrow, but most of the people I have known who are church leaders and Bible teachers, pastors and preachers and stuff, like they love teaching the Bible. They love studying theology. They love getting up in that pulpit and talking about scripture. And there's some excitement and enthusiasm for it, even the parts that maybe generally are considered boring, like Leviticus. I don't think the problem is that the people in the pulpit and leading the church don't care about the Bible or don't get excited about it. Ironically, I think in our churches, we give a disproportionate amount of our time and energy and attention to teaching the Bible. And it's so evident by yet another survey that it ain't working.
Sermon-centric.
Exactly. It's not working. We do Sunday school classes with kids and we teach them Bible stories. Like you say, we saturate so much Bible content. Maybe it's the way it's taught. Maybe it's not the big story. Maybe it's disconnected into these little bite-sized digestible chunks of helpful advice from scripture, which kind of mutilates it. Fine, we can talk about that. But I don't think most evangelical churches are not opening the Bible or not teaching the Bible. I think they're doing that perhaps almost as much as they're singing choruses. But it's not working. It is clearly not teaching people either the Bible or theology. So I want to be like, what the heck are we wasting our time on here, people? It ain't working. Mike.
I'm not saying we should just preach the Bible more.
Or with greater enthusiasm and excitement.
Though I would like us to. I think greater enthusiasm would really matter. But I do think part of the issue is not just as you've described, something we're doing is not sticking in people's brains. But like I said before, I just think we don't, because of the sermon-centric Sunday, we don't have a space that makes sense in our gathered time together, not our extra Wednesday night thing for the nerds, but like our gathered time together where we teach theology. I'm serious. We've implemented at my church here in Durham a catechism for the kids that we wrote. Our senior pastor, our children's ministry director, and I was involved in it because we thought they could learn every Bible story across the Old and New Testaments and finish and still have no idea what the Trinity is, if the Holy Spirit is a person, like any of those things. That would not automatically arise from the Bible stories. We need some more theology. And my only other point of what I said before was I think we don't teach the theology because we already assume it's boring before we even introduce it to people and see if it's boring. I think it's beautiful, and if the person teaching it thinks it's beautiful and actually thinks people might be attracted to it, I think it would change the way they talked about it.
There may be some truth to that, I think, but the other reason we don't teach the theology is because a lot of church leaders, number one, don't know it themselves, and number two, they don't think it's going to draw a crowd. So they want to teach 5 steps to raising godly kids rather than here's the critical things you need to know about the Trinity. Mike, how are you solving this in your church?
Sorry, Mike.
Oh, man, it's so solved. I would say if Legionnaires' Disease did a survey with Max. No, I would say what I instantly went to is it's the same impulse that wants to put the 10 Commandments in schools and think that's what it means to bring God back into schools, right? It's just, it's a magic view of spiritual formation that says if we just expose people to the Bible, if we just expose people to correct pieces of information or cute Bible stories, that somehow forms them into people that understand the greater narrative. And so for me, and I hate to be just a repeated banging gong on this thing, but when you preach a gospel that solves an individual problem, once that problem is solved, then what does it matter what you think about Leviticus or the Trinity? Like those are all just bonus points. That has nothing to do with real life. And so when we preach a gospel that doesn't lead us naturally into curiosity, awe, wonder, and the bigger story, then this is what we get. The Bible becomes bite-sized nuggets for helpful wisdom. And there is a need for that, no doubt. I am not denigrating that at all. but it's not couched in anything other than what is helpful or beneficial. And so it just becomes another part of the infomercializing of Jesus.
I agree. I mean, when you tell people the gospel is how you get to heaven and avoid hell, and then they accept that, they go, okay, I'm in. I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
If they believe the gospel is how you live in perpetual union with God, then the question is, well, I need to know more of who this God is. And how does my life with him operate? And how does he dwell in me? And how do I reveal his presence in
your presentation of the gospel will lead to the big questions or shut them down.
Right.
There's no middle ground there.
You could argue then the real foundational problem here with the lack of theological education in the church is that the church doesn't think it's necessary for the gospel it's preaching.
That's right. That's exactly what I would say.
Ouch.
And I think that's a communal thing, right? Because we preach an individual gospel. The sanctification just becomes sin management. It doesn't teach me how to become fully human. Community just becomes an add-on to whether or not it helps me. There's no ecclesiology in terms of what I'm bringing to the church in the community of gifted men and women that God has called together. So yes, it just leaves us bereft of anything other than, well, does this help? And so that's why we're so application heavy in sermons, because I mean, I get this critique all the time. You just need to apply it more. And I'm like, listen, if Paul didn't apply every sermon and Jesus didn't apply every sermon, then I'm not sure our obsessing with what I need to do at work this week in light of this text is super helpful. I think there's something bigger. There's a bigger question that needs to be asked there. So anyway, I would totally concur with your restatement. And I think there is a way to teach the Bible that captures that. I think Bible Project, for instance, does a beautiful, beautiful job of that. Like when people are new to the Bible and they just say, well, how do you understand this thing? That's where I would always direct them.
All right. Hey, I had one more story that we don't have time to get to, but I want to give a plug for it anyway. Some of you have been watching the news. You know that federal troops have come into Chicago, not far from where we are here. They're arresting lots of people, including American citizens. There's some horrific images that came out this weekend of helicopters dropping on top of apartment buildings and raids, children being led out in zip ties. It's just nuts. And we didn't have time to talk about it, but a friend of mine I saw on, it looked like he was arrested. He was in an article, pastor friend of mine, David Swanson, who's in the city. And he was at a protest and he was arrested apparently. And we reached out to him. He's going to be coming on my show, The Skye Pod, this Friday to talk about what's been happening in Chicago, what his church and other churches are doing in response to this. So if that topic is of interest to you, come back on Friday, check out The Skye Pod. We're going to talk about that. Also want to plug my devotional With God Daily, the daily devotional for people who hate devotionals. We teach theology in With God Daily and get into deeper issues. Like we did a whole series a couple months ago on the theology of the temple. Right now we're going through a series of saints, people that have influenced my faith, both living and dead.
Yep.
So
and thank you for that, Skye. I appreciate our interview.
It is you're in there, Mike. We're going to do a whole month on
that
Mike
was the
Erre.
joke. That was the joke.
Nice
sorry.
I thought you were genuinely thanking me for the people we're highlighting in there. But keep it up, Mike. You could make the list next year. You can check that out at withgoddaily.com. And we have an interview coming up, so stay tuned. And we will see you next week on the HOLYPOST podcast.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. October 10th is World Mental Health Day, and boy, I'm a little worried about the world's mental health. Wouldn't it be great to find someone who can help you on your own journey to better mental health? BetterHelp therapists have helped more than 5 million people worldwide. I like the fact that you can request a Christian therapist and that you can change therapists at any time until you find the person just right for you. Lisa and I have really benefited from working with a Christian therapist from time to time, and I know you will too. The right therapist can make a huge difference, and BetterHelp has been matching people with the right therapist for 12 years. This World Mental Health Day, we're celebrating the therapists who've helped millions of people take a step forward. If you're ready to find the right therapist for you, BetterHelp can help you start that journey. HOLYPOST listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/HOLYPOST. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/HOLYPOST. Today's episode is sponsored by Sunday's Food for Dogs. We love our dog. Her name is Kina. We love to give her belly rubs, and she loves to patrol our backyard to make sure no squirrels break into our house to steal our valuables. We also love to give her Sunday's Food for Dogs. It's fresh, healthy dog food that's easy to store and serve. Most dog food is one or the other, either fresh and healthy or easy to store and serve. Because Sunday's is air-dried, it doesn't require refrigeration or prep. It comes right to our door so we never run out. And it's healthy food. Human-grade ingredients, 90% meat, 10% superfoods, 0% anything else. Folks who've switched their dogs to Sunday's notice health improvements like softer fur, fresher breath, and more energy. Kina loves Sunday's Food for Dogs, and we love that it keeps her healthy and strong so she can keep the squirrels from taking our stuff. Give it a try. Right now, you can get 40% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost or use code HOLYPOST at checkout for 40% off your first order.
Today, Kaitlyn is talking to two good friends of the HOLYPOST who've written a new book together. A.J. Swoboda is an assistant professor of Bible theology and world Christianity at Bushnell University. He also leads a Doctor of Ministry program around Christian formation and soul care at Friends University. He's the author of more than a dozen books. And Nijay Gupta is professor of New Testament at Northern Seminary. He's a HOLYPOST pundit and founder of the popular Substack newsletter, Engaging Scripture. Gupta is an award-winning author of numerous books, and he's written commentaries on Galatians, Philippians, Colossians, and 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. He's also a senior translator for the New Living Translation. Their new book is called Slow Theology, 8 Principles for Resilient Faith in a Turbulent World. Here is Kaitlyn's conversation with AJ and Nijay.
Nijay and AJ, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be talking to you.
So good to be with you.
This is so fun. We don't get to do a lot of interviews with two authors, so this is just really fun. If one of you is being boring, the other one can come in.
Yes.
It's great.
Yes. Righting the wrongs. I love it.
I'm really excited to talk about y'all's new book, Slow Theology, 8 Practices for Resilient Faith in a Turbulent World. Let's talk first about just why this project, why this book. You all have been doing a podcast together called Slow Theology. But before we get into why slow, why this book? Why now?
I'll start. Yeah, the awkward thing about interviewing two of us is Nijay and I don't have a script, so I might speak over him and he over me. But
go for it.
Nijay and I, longtime friends. We both worked together at seminary years ago, and when I had written a book years ago called After Doubt, which was a book about kind of how to walk through the experience of doubt and deconstruction. And when that book kind of came out, we realized that this was a bigger deal than we had anticipated in terms of the conversation. And what we really wanted to do when we originally started our podcast, which was originally called, what was it called, Nijay? It was called
In Faith and Doubt.
In Faith and Doubt. That was the original title. And then we switched it to Slow Theology. Really, the heart of the podcast was to give people resources to process their theology in a way that reflected patience and thoughtfulness and non-reactivity. So when we started that, it eventually just became we have to write this book. We have to write on how to do theology in a non-reactive way. What does it look like to be slow, meditative, really, really intentional about what one thinks, because we all have learned reactive theology tends to be pretty bad theology. We just are reacting about stuff. So that's kind of the heart of it, is we wanted to give 8 practices and principles for how to have a resilient faith. And luckily it's connecting with people really, really well. Yeah.
I was speaking to a group of ministry leaders a couple weeks ago, and when they walked in the room, you could just tell they're exhausted. And I like to refer to this is the age of the big D's: disillusionment, disenchantment, disappointment, discouragement. And it's like this big fog that you're kind of walking around in. And what AJ and I try to do in this book is say, all the stuff we're experiencing in some way was true in the biblical period. And so we actually did a recent podcast episode on the wandering people of God. This is a phrase from Ernst Casimon, but this idea that the wilderness wandering wasn't a one-time thing. It's a part of our journey in life. And one thing we talked about in the episode with Ernst Käsemann, this German theologian, it's the key isn't that we end the wandering. The key is that we realize we're being led.
Mm.
And we really want people to know what they're going through isn't a punishment from God. What they're going through isn't the disappearance of God. It's actually a normal and perhaps even formative part of our discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I was thinking even, because I came back to the book. I read the book quite a while ago to endorse it, and I was happy to. And then I came back to look at it before this interview, and I thought, wow, this slow thing keeps coming up. I had a friend recently. I'm in a big time of transition in my life. And this friend reminded me of this prayer by Teilhard de Chardin that starts, above all, trust in the slow work of God. And even picking the book up, I was kind of like, dang it. Like, I'm kind of over this slow thing right now. Like, that is really challenging, both practicing things slowly and trusting God, who sometimes feels like God is working, very slowly. I'd love to talk a little bit about the beginning of the book. You set up both how this is in relationship to kind of the deconstruction conversation, and you bring in this idea of chemotherapy. Can you talk a little bit, either of you, about what that is? Because I love this as an alternative to the way the conversation around deconstruction has often happened.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this real quick. So, when AJ wrote his book After Doubt, which I love, by the way, and I recommend that highly to people, there's two, what I loved about his book, he sent it to me before it came out, and he said, what do you think? And I called him and I said, this needs to be more than a book. It needs to be a movement, because at that time, you had two default settings. One was the camp of certainty. I know everything, or I pretend to know everything, and I'm super confident in that. And if you don't know everything, then you're not a good Christian. But then the opposite of that is sort of this, like, I'm smarter than God, I'm smarter than the Bible, this kind of deconstruction to the vanishing point. Now, AJ and I both care about people that wrestle with doubt. The book of Jude, AJ actually told me about this, and Jude says, have mercy on those that doubt. There's a lot of compassion in the Bible for people that are wrestling with these things. But what AJ opened up was this idea that there's actually a third approach beyond certainty and beyond kind of, overly relying on cynicism, is this idea of like having questions and using that as an opportunity to deepen our relationship with God. So, brief version of the story. We learned that in World War II, there was a bombing of this harbor in Italy where there's some U.S. vessels, and on it contained mustard gas bombs. And these mustard gas bombs leaked into the waters where sailors were swimming, and ended up infecting, obviously, these sailors with a terrible mustard gas disease. And they ended up dying, but much quicker than they were expecting. And one of the things they realized that this, toxic, poisonous substance was preventing their blood cells from replicating. And as horrible as that was, because many, many people died, they wondered, could we use this against cancer cells? And the very first chemotherapy treatment was created a few years later called Mustargen. You can look it up, Mustargen. Wow. So the first chemotherapy treatment was based on mustard gas. What AJ and I often think about is when we're in a process of questioning the teachings we received, it can be really good. And we wrote an article several years ago about how it can be not letting go of God, but actually smashing idols.
Yes.
Maybe we are idolizing a pastor or a movement or a book or a teaching or a false view of God. But the problem with something like mustard gas is a little bit in the right ways can cure you. But my daughter, and we don't have to dwell on this, my daughter had cancer from ages 1 to 3. She's doing great, and she's been cancer-free for 11 years by God's grace. But we all know that chemotherapy is poison. But it's what they refer to as the good poison, meaning in the right doses, in the right way, it can cure you. In the wrong doses, in the wrong way, it can kill you. And so this process of slow theology in a turbulent world is recognizing the not knowing, recognizing the harm and trauma that is sometimes done, and addressing it can be so good.
Yeah.
But we have to use surgical tools for this. We can't just apply this willy-nilly.
I love that. And I love how you were just describing earlier, this is an alternative to both the certainty and the alternative that can be, yes, cynical, but also I've seen a lot of people who went to seminary, for example, and learned all of this theology that they didn't know before. And it felt like, whoa, I was kind of lied to. Like, I thought the answers were really simple.
Liberating.
And then I learned all this stuff and I was like, whoa, there's so much out there. And they enjoy living in that world of like, okay, there's a bunch of theories about the atonement actually, and I'm not really sure what the answer is, or there's this difficult theological question in interpreting this one passage, and I'm okay with the uncertainty. But then they get in the pastorate, and people are like, I can't live in wishy-washy forever. Like, I need something. Like, that just feels so unmoored. I don't even know what to do. And I love this as a way of saying, slow. We're not just rushing to certainty, but we're also not content to live in just like, I don't know there's no answers to anything. I have nothing that I'm kind of moored to or holding on to. I would love to hear one or both of you talk a little bit about just how I was so struck looking at the book again. This is just the world we live in that lives at a pace that says, let's get to conclusions, let's get to answers, and let's get there as fast as possible. That's true in all of our work for the most part. That's true in many of our relationships. Like, let's just get to a resolution without any of that work. Talk to us a little bit about, you give these different practices. What were you trying to accomplish in terms of helping us slow down? How do those help us avoid that kind of cultural pressure?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I even this morning, Nijay and I were talking about our phone. I'm holding up my iPhone here. I mean, 2008 was the day, small step for man, a giant leap for AJ Swoboda. When I got my first iPhone, 2008. It's incredible what this little device has enabled us to do. I can immediately communicate with individuals. I can order a pizza, have it in hand in 15 minutes. I can write responses to people across the world. I can write a chapter in my Google Docs. I mean, it's an incredible technology. And what it does, for a lot of us, we are blind to how that quickness and that speed shapes our hearts and our minds. I call it, I was telling Nijay this morning, I call it speed privilege. And speed privilege in the Western world is like, it's this privilege that we have of immediacy that we're blind to. We don't even know we have it. And unfortunately, with all the gifts that speed privilege gives us, it has a wildly detrimental effect on our spiritual lives. What Dallas Willard called the with God life. And here's how it affects us, is that over time, as we come to God with our big questions, as we come to God to wrestle out scripture, as we come to wrestle out our theology, as we come to God with the deepest cries of our heart, whether we want to or not, because we have been immersed in speed privilege, all of a sudden we begin to engage with God with that rubric. And we expect God to respond to us the way Amazon Prime sends things to our home.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is my students at the university level, I hear this all the time. I've been praying to God for days about this, and I've heard nothing from God. And I've even had a student say, I just don't know if he's real anymore. It is not that God is not real. It's that we have applied our expectations of speed privilege on the living God.
Yeah.
And we don't have a way of engaging God for who God is. In short, we've been colonized to speed. And it disables our capacity for meditation, for slowing down, which is crazy to think about. I mean, I think part of the heart of the book is that in the end, actually slowing down gets things done faster. It's like driving down the road when everybody's in the fast lane. Sometimes you go in the slow lane and it gets you there way faster than going in the fast lane. And in the most counterintuitive way, slowing down with God actually brings you to sanctification much quicker than you thought. So I think the heart of the whole thing is you got to see the colonization that your soul has undergone by living in this world and detaching from that colonization and engaging with God at God's pace rather than the world's pace.
I want to share one of my favorite stories from the book, and AJ and I both kind of relish in this story. There's a great rabbinic story that we tell where there's this man journeying from one city to another, and he's at a crossroads. And there's a little boy sitting there, and the man says, there's two routes to the city. And he says, which one should I take? And the boy says, the first one is shorter but longer, and the second one is longer but shorter. And the man impulsively chooses the first one because he heard the word shorter. And from a visual distance perspective, it's shorter. So this man journeys down that that way to the city, and then it's blocked at the end. And so he comes all the way back to the crossroads, and he says, you told me that one was shorter. And he said, but I also told you it was longer. Because he had to come all the way back and go the other way. And isn't this just a great parable for the Christian life, that we always want the short way, and often the long way is actually the only way to get there. And I feel like that resonates with so many elements of my life where I just try to rush through, you know, and it just, what I hear this Jewish Christian tradition tell us is most of the time the slow way is not only the better way, but perhaps the only way.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds so similar to, I know so many people who had a moment, maybe it was politically aligned, 2016, 2020, where they started questioning a lot of the theology, maybe the politics they grew up with. And they wanted the answers so quickly that they just kind of found a new tribe to put themselves in. And it was like, okay, wow, that was fast. I believed all of these things very strongly, and now I believe all these other things very strongly. And I'm like at home and I'm settled and I don't have to keep thinking about it. But a lot of them are now, 4 or 5 or 8 years later, doing it all over again because they put themselves in a new tribe that is now, they're realizing, not like all the right answers, all of the perfect belonging and community. And the people who wandered for a while and said like, okay, I'm reevaluating things and I'm trying things out and I'm in community, but I'm not, pledging my loyalty to some political tribe. I'm figuring things out and I'm asking questions. And they're not having to do the whole thing all over again, like the man walking all the way back and trying a new path, because they were willing to say, like, for a while, I'm not going to be sure. I'm not going to settle somewhere for a little while. One of the things I was so struck by reading the book again, looking at it again recently, was you all describe in the course of these 8 practices a kind of set of postures and questions and motivations for doing theological work that are not good postures and questions and motivations, and then some kind of postures and motivations that are better. Could you talk a little bit about, if we're going into this and we're saying like, I want to be faithful in my theological reflections. I don't want to be a theologian. I just want to be someone who's thinking well about who God is and reading the Bible well. How would you describe the kind of motivation and posture of someone who you might want to say like, hey, maybe reevaluate that, and someone who you might say, that's a really great way to go into this?
Yeah. I'll start, and then Nijay, you can take over. But there's this funny moment in Matthew chapter 4 where Jesus is tempted by the devil to turn stones into bread, and the devil says, "Hey, it's still a little magic trick here." I had a student who asked me, like, is it wrong to turn stones into bread? Like, is there some commandment that says you can't do that? And there's no. I would go. There's no like, the 11th commandment is not like, thou shalt not turn stones into bread. It's not found anywhere. And it's, when you take that story and compare it to Jesus's other stories, how many times does Jesus turn things into bread? He turns bread into bread. He does it all the time. Yeah. It's not about that. It's not the action that was a problem. It was the motivation. And the difference is like the reason you're doing it. Are you doing this in obedience to the Father, or are you doing this in obedience to the voice of the serpent? I think theology, there are many times as we do theology it may be that we're coming to the right conclusion, but the motivation under which we're doing it is at its core sometimes even demonic. There was a book written by Helmut Tillicke called A Letter. It's a manifesto to young theologians. He was a seminary professor, and he talked about this experience as a German seminary professor of noticing students who would come into the seminary world, and they would come and learn all the Greek and all the Hebrew and Aramaic, and they would learn all the words, and they figured out what hypostasis meant and all these sort of words. And they would leave seminary, and they would take all of these new theological tools, and he would notice that all of a sudden they were using this theology that they got not to serve God's people, but they were using it for power. And he distinguishes what he calls the difference between the theology of love, which is when you take theology to serve God's people, and what he called diabolical theology, which is theology that's used as a power play. I think in our moment in time, we've got a dangerous moment here where we are not using orthodoxy as a means to serve God's people. We're using it as a power play. We're using it for purposes to control and coerce rather than to serve God's people. So at the end of the day, getting at the heart of theology is a really big deal. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? Why are you turning bread into bread or stones into bread? What's the motivation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, AJ. Man, you should be a preacher. You'd be really good at that. Where my heart goes, and this is in the book, is our chapter on lament and taking our pain to God. And I remember reading a Christianity article many years ago talking about the experience of immigrant pastors who come to the United States to do ministry. And they asked all these pastors from South America, Central America, India, other parts of Asia, Africa, and they said, what's something you consistently notice about American Christianity? And many of them said the same thing. They said how much we talk about fun in the church and make everything about fun. Come to this event, it's going to be fun.
So true. So true.
Come to this Saturday learning session, it's going to be fun. And they said, we don't mind fun, but that's not really why we're in church. And when you look at it from that perspective, there's no place for melancholy in the church. There's no place for a discipleship of sadness and grief, because what we want, from people who go to church is, did you come sad and leave happy? And I'm not a party pooper. Like, I like having fun in church. I like Krispy Kreme after church. They had Krispy Kreme at church on Sunday. I like that. But Nancy Ortberg, I read this in Nancy Ortberg essay. There are more lament psalms than praise psalms. I can't believe I didn't know that as a biblical scholar until like 5 years ago. That tells us something.
Yeah.
Jesus' words from the cross, they tell us things about our spirituality. I think as our discipleship grows deeper, we need to be more comfortable with periods of sad discipleship. And yes, we have the joy of the Lord, but there's actually, that could actually be in the sort of operating system of us while still mourning with those who mourn and saying like, this is just a period of ashes and sackcloth. And are our churches and pastors ready for that? Are they ready to give that to the people? I lived in England for 3 years and went to this little Methodist church. And every week, a lay person would go up and read prayers of the people. Usually it's prayers for world news, country news, state news, and city news, and local news. And how would it reshape our churches and our spirituality if every week we just prayed through the news, not with answers, but just, God help us. God be with these people that are suffering, and maybe pray about good news too. But like I part of what AJ has taught me is we often waste our anger on social media as a first resort. We have this powder keg ready to explode, and then the first thing we do is go on social media and we get cynical. And I'm talking about me here, and I go, those people, and I hate them, and look at this video. And then we feel quote unquote better, and then we don't take it to the Lord.
Yes.
And what if we took it to the Lord first? And then maybe don't post on social media.
I like what you're thinking, Nijay. That's a good,
I'm saying this to me because I was really deep into social media being my life for years and years, because I'm an introvert. I like to sit at home, and I'm realizing how that has actually affected my ability to take angry things to God.
Yeah, I love that. I was just a couple days ago talking to a parent who had a young teenage daughter, and she was talking about how this kid is really, questioning their faith, questioning the existence of God, has been pretty angry, has experienced some tough stuff in the church, and is pretty angry. And she was saying how delighted she was that her daughter went to one of the pastors at the church and said, "Hey, so I don't know if I believe in God anymore. Can we undo my baptism? Is there an option for undoing the baptism?" And it was funny because there was other people in the room while she was telling me this that I think have kids, and we're kind of like, why are you happy about that? And she was like, she went to a pastor and was trying to fight a little bit. She wanted to get into it with the pastor. And the pastor was just sort of like, it's an interesting question. Let's talk about it. I don't always believe in God every day. I have some questions. And it just reminded me, one, of love this mom who had the posture of I love that she's still wanting to fight with the pastor. That means there's a relationship here. She's trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah, that's it.
And it reminded me of how much I have talked to people in churches, students in the seminary, of that's partially what we see in the lament psalms is you're mad at God, but you're still talking to God. And that's huge. Yeah. And this slow theology mindset I mean, what that pastor did was this, to say, like, before I jump to, actually, no, you can't undo a baptism, and actually you are sealed by the Spirit, and you are, it was like, I'm not actually jumping to argue with you. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I have some things to say that kind of lower the temperature. And I just loved that. I thought that was great. Can
I say something, Kaitlyn?
Go for it. Yeah.
Am I allowed to have my favorite chapter? Because I have one.
You can, yeah.
Because we wrote the book. I'm allowed to have a favorite. My favorite chapter is this young woman who came to her pastor and actually said what she actually thought. Speaks to a level of discipleship that is deeper than I wish every Christian had that approach towards their faith. Not that they'd walk away from their baptism, but they actually said the thing. My favorite chapter is our chapter on Go to the Problems. Because the whole idea of this chapter is, when we cannot take something to the church by way of question, concern, issue, problem, it's not that the question goes away. It's that we stop taking it to the church and we begin taking it everywhere else. And in academia, in curriculum, there's 3 different kinds of curriculum. There's what's called overt curriculum. So overt curriculum is the stuff that's on the PowerPoint. Implicit curriculum is the stuff that's taught but never said. And the third kind of curriculum is the stuff you never, ever, ever talk about, and it ends up deeply deforming a person, and it's called null curriculum. And null curriculum is when you never talk about something, and the impression is this is something we shouldn't talk about. We have to change the mindset of discipleship from those are uncomfortable conversations to no, go to the hard stuff. Don't run from it. Go to the hard stuff, because only if you are wounded or hurt, you would never be like, I'm not going to look at the pain. No, you go to the pain. You got to go to it.
Oh, I love that so much. And somewhat along those lines, I was going back over the book recently, and I thought, okay, I'm just curious if Nijay or AJ have a theological question that they still don't have an answer for. And I'm curious if either of you want to share both what that question is, but also how that unanswered question has shaped you.
Jeez, going deep here. I'll say it. I know it's controversial, but like, what happens to all the people that don't believe in Jesus, especially the people that never heard the gospel?
Yeah.
Or more importantly, the people that haven't heard the real gospel. Because I live in Portland, Oregon, and a lot of the people that I talk to around me that say they don't want anything to do with Christianity, and they explain why, they haven't heard the gospel. They've learned false gospels, and I try, right? But I can't save everybody by myself. No, I try, but like when people talk to me about this, students, and even with my kids. I believe in the Bible. I believe that there is judgment. I believe that people have to stand, before God, before their Maker. But I hold in tension. I have to hold in tension. On the one hand, the reality of sin, and the punishment of sin, and on the other hand, the loving nature of God. That doesn't make me a universalist. It doesn't make me an exclusionist. What I often tell people is that's above my pay grade. I believe in all the truths of Scripture. I believe in what the church has taught for 2,000 years. But gosh, my heart will absolutely burst if I try to process it with my teeny tiny brain.
Yeah, totally.
So this is one thing where I'm like, I'm not a universalist. I'm not a 98% of people will blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, I know you're just. And I know you're loving. I just don't know how I live with that. Because I don't know how you live with that.
Yeah.
And I don't disbelieve it, but I just say I don't want. I want to allow there to be these awkward tensions. And let me just say a word about tension, but I'd love to hear AJ's thoughts. I had a student once send me. I was teaching a interpretation class. I had a student send me this meme, and it said, if the Old Testament and Jesus are in contradiction, Jesus always wins. And she said, what do you think? And I said, that presumes every tension in Scripture must be resolved. And what I said was, I'm I play guitar, at least to myself. And, a guitar makes music on the basis of tension. And the goal of playing guitar isn't to get rid of the tension. It makes music on tension. It's to tune the tensions. The first thing you do when you pick up a guitar is you tune it. And so that doesn't mean there aren't objective answers to things, but it means there's just so much that we don't know as creatures.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I'll be real short. I mean, one area of my own theology that I certainly can say today I'm not where I was. It may seem super weird, but it's actually the third commandment, which is to not misuse God's name. And I think in previous iterations of my life ministry and calling, I would have been very, very willing in pastoral leadership and ministry to say, I really think God is doing this and doing that. And the more and more and more I've become aware of my own heart and my own story, how often I've been willing to put God's name on my agenda. And I'm having a new appreciation for not, as a person in power, not being too quick to overspeak for what God is doing and letting God's word be enough and not need to speak in between this. In between, I get to. So I actually am losing a great deal of sleep over that as we speak, because I'm going to tell our congregation that on Sunday. So I'm feeling great.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Great.
Thank you for
wrestling
through
that.
for sharing that. That's a huge and I appreciate you both sharing something that isn't finished. Because I think part of what's hard is a lot of people who even write a book about deconstruction or write a book about, going through some particular theological change or some difficult season, like some challenging, their relationship with God was shaped by a challenging season. You write the book when you've come to the conclusions. And sometimes, even though that can be really helpful for people to know there's a way out of this, there's an end point to this suffering, or there can be some answers to these questions. It's hard when it's but it pushes that rushing through, right? To just kind of go I want to get to the end of the story where this person's at when they wrote this book, not be in the wondering part I'm in now. With the little bit of time we have left, I would love to hear one or both of you just talk about, someone picks up this book, they're curious about just a faithful, healthy, slow way to do theology, to ask big questions, to read the Bible. What would you want people to actually do differently after reading the book? How might their practice, seeing as there's 8 practices here, how might their practice in their life look different when they come to a big theological question they're trying to answer?
I'll be real brief. I'm pretty convinced that individualism is the womb of heresy. And that when we choose to do theology apart from the people of God, the result reflects that. Do not do it alone. And certainly don't just do it with the living, do it with the dead. Do it, if you're white, with people of color. Do it with people that do differently, that look differently than you are. I think that the gift of tradition is that tradition invites us to read God's word and love Jesus with all of God's people and not just the ones that happen to be on my news feed.
I love it. Communion of Saints. Thank you.
I shouldn't have let him go first. That was mine too. But no, I do. I was thinking of something else too. When I talk to people going through this kind of thing, where disillusionment and all that, I say, go to baptisms. Every time I go to baptisms, I'm like, this is it. This is
I
it.
cry
This is why.
every time.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's one of the most beautiful things in the church is people expressing, remembering why we got this started this in the first place. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And then I promise you, Kaitlyn, I'm not just saying this because you have a show called Curiously Kaitlyn, but talk to young people of faith.
Yes.
I've noticed my kids who are teenagers are not nearly as cynical because they're reading the Bible and they're like, oh, there's some really cool stuff in here.
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah.
And I've noticed that is amazing. And then, again, not rocket science, but talk to older saints who've been around for a while, remember world wars and things like that, or their parents remembered world wars. And they're, a lot of the older folks that I talk to that are grandparents, great-grandparents, they're like, they help put things in perspective, the long view. And, gosh, I worry sometimes about the platforming of really young people who just haven't experienced a lot of life to come to the far side of cynicism to say, how do I just follow Jesus with the scars?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love how those two answers do go together. It's like, well, where do you get to talk to little kids and old people about what's in the Bible and what God's doing and how do you live your life faithfully in the church, in reading, you know, across the communion of saints and like being in close community with people where their kids actually feel close enough to you to ask their weird questions.
That's right.
AJ and Nijay, thank you so much for your really faithful work in this book and for your time today.
Thanks for your hospitality, Kaitlyn. It's really great to talk.
Hey, make a sacrifice to the algorithm gods and like and subscribe to this video and our content. It's the only way they will honor us on YouTube.